Daniel Craig is definitely not doing another Bond movie. In a super candid interview with Time Out while doing press for Spectre, Daniel Craig is asked if he'd want to do another Bond movie. His answer?
I'd rather slash my wrists than play James Bond again.
I can't believe you've got that written down there.
Of course. I have a terrible memory. People have to write things down for me. So there was a time when you didn't want to be the next James Bond.
Look, there's no point in making excuses about it, but it was 2 days after I finished shooting the last movie.
Sure.
I went straight into an interview and someone said, would you do another one?
Oh, okay.
And I went, no. Instead of saying something, you know, with style and grace, I gave a really stupid answer.
If you were asked 200 meters from the end of a marathon whether you'd run another marathon, you'd be fairly short and sweet about the answer.
The burning question, will it be your last one? Who knows?
Will this be your last?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I just don't know. The honest answer is I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, Daniel Craig, we could use some good news here. Daniel Craig, will you return as James Bond?
Yes.
Thanks so much. Daniel Craig, everybody.
You know, I could spend ages talking about the first couple of years after the release of Spectre. The uncertainty whether or not Craig would return to reprise the role of Bond. The usual nonsense rumors of Idris Elba or Tom Hiddleston being casted as the next Bond. But I have to admit, I felt a certain sense of relief when Craig announced his return for Bond 25. Even if it was just to put those rumors to bed of unlikely actors or even actresses stepping in to take over the role of Bond. But mostly because I always kind of felt Spectre wasn't going to be Daniel Craig's final Bond movie. They made it very clear this time around though, this would be Craig's final one. The definitive ending of an era. The tying up of all the loose ends, as they kept calling it. Originally, Danny Boyle was brought aboard to direct Bond 25, partnered up with a screenplay treatment of John Hodge. Most fans were pretty excited about this, especially coming after a period of years of really no news to appetite our excitement for Bond. But eventually, Danny Boyle and Eon parted due to creative differences. This is something we fans are still speculating about to this day. Supposedly it had something to do with the ending of the film, which Danny Boyle apparently wasn't too keen on, but none of this has been confirmed until this day. Instead, we got Cary Fukunaga to direct the movie. Who? Which to a lot of us was a pretty unknown director by the time he was announced. It wasn't until 2019, 4 years after the release of Spectre, that we finally got a press conference.
Welcome to GoldenEye Jamaica.
We've got quite a ride in store for Mr. Bond, and no title, unfortunately.
I was going to ask, dare I say, like, do we have a title, but completely nothing at the moment?
Bond 25.
No, I can't remember the last time we had a title when we announced the beginning of the film.
The Jamaica press conference. Despite its iconic location and officially announcing the cast to us, it was one of the weirdest Bond press conferences that we had. No title announcement, a weird presenter that nobody ever heard about, Mickey G claiming he can't even remember the last time he announced a new movie title at one of these, even though they did exactly that at the last press conference. Or what about the one before that? And the one before that? Heck, I can't even remember the last time they didn't announce the title in this way. But whatever, it wasn't until months later that they finally announced the title to be No Time to Die on social media. A title I personally really had to get used to at first, mostly because it seemed pretty generic coming in a long line of other Bond titles that include the word die in there. But it's been a long time since they first announced that title, so you could say it kinda grew on me since then. Most notably about No Time to Die's production period to me were two things: the outlandish rumors coming in all the time and the constant release date delays. Firstly due to brushing up the movie a little bit before it released, but the later pushbacks were all because of the pandemic. As a Bond fan, this period ended up almost beating the longest gap between Bond movies since the 6-year gap between License to Kill and GoldenEye. I don't hope to ever beat that gap, but this one got pretty damn close. I can't characterize this period as long, frustrating, and frankly, a bit concerning. Why? Well, obviously I can't speak for all Bond fans, and in this sensitive political climate we seem to live in, it seems way too touchy to even go there. But to a lot of Bond fans, the concerns for this movie had to do with things seeming too woke. Especially in a period where movies that were categorized as such seem to have really flopped. And again, I can't speak for all, but a lot of Bond fans were pretty concerned that No Time to Die was going to follow suit. I'd be lying if I claimed I didn't have any concerns myself. The constant promotion and pride of hiring a feminist screenwriter, Barbara talking about the importance of the Me Too era on the press conference, rumors of the 007 title being given to Lashana Lynch's character, who in the press seemed more concerned with the inclusion of a tampon in the movie to display realistic feminine issues and such. Thank heavens they didn't go with that idea.
The name's Lashana Lynch. I am so excited about this. Apparently, Lashana is our new 007.
And I stress this again, I guess to some people this kind of stuff is real progress, and maybe I'm just old-fashioned when it comes to my Bond, but having seen feminists and people bash our beloved franchise for years, despite it constantly updating itself, and then seeing people who clearly don't care about the franchise to begin with being so excited about a woman taking over the 007 title, it really isn't the stuff that excites me personally. It feels more like a political statement than an actual interesting story element. At the very least, I think most Bond fans have a very simple wish list. They want Bond to be the smooth, sophisticated bastard, drive fast cars, get the girl, say the right lines, and save the day. Now the talks among the fandom were more along the lines of, is he even going to be 007 again in this movie? Is he still going to be alive by the end of this? Will he even be allowed to sleep with someone in this political era? Of course, I'm all for the updating of the Bond movies to make them contemporary each time. I'm just saying the updating should always be there, but it shouldn't be the main focus and going overboard, because Hollywood proved that updating to this extent isn't always the formula to success, at least in my opinion. In any case, by fall 2021, having waited 6 years and about a half a dozen delays, No Time to Die was eventually released to the public, and we finally got the chance to see if our concerns held any merit, and if No Time to Die had been worth the incredible long wait. I was so relieved to see the movie starting off with a gun barrel again, which was among our concerns for Spectre. I'm glad they kept that tradition here too. And also that it was actually Bond walking into the gun barrel, not some other 00 agent we know is going to appear in the movie. For the first time though, there are two different versions of the gun barrel, with the US getting the traditional MGM logo beforehand, and the international version getting the Universal logo, dissolving into a huge white circle followed by the signature white dots. I prefer the US version a lot more than that stuff. The gun barrel itself is again different to the traditional Maurice Binder type of black and white design that I still prefer to everything else. It has a very icy grey look, and most notably,
BANG! Blood dribbles down!
There isn't any of that. I don't get it. It's such a signature part of the gun barrel, and it's absent. Fans have theorized that this is due to the ending of the movie and such, but Yeah, anyway, I do like Hans Zimmer's soundtrack supporting it, and Craig looks pretty slick in that tuxedo this time around. Overall, I can't complain too much. Jumping into the movie, you are greeted with beautiful cinematography of a snowy forest in Norway. If you are a Bond fan, you were actually already aware that No Time to Die was going to continue the storyline of Spectre, focusing on the continuation of the storyline of the Bond girl, Madeleine Swan.
A man once came to our house to kill my father.
Fans have been theorizing beforehand from the trailer that this was the man coming to her house in some flashback scene, and we were correct. French child actress Colleen Devault plays the young Madeleine Swan, and she's very well casted, bearing a striking resemblance to Léa Seydoux. It's moments like these that really feel like a fresh new take in Bond filmmaking. It's clear we're no longer watching a Sam Mendes Bond movie, and although I like his direction too, a new take is very welcomed. We also get to Madeleine's mom, an alcoholic who doesn't seem to care that this strange masked dude is standing in her living room. I was kinda surprised to see that this is Madeleine's mother. I always assumed that the woman next to Mr. White in Quantum of Solace was Madeleine's mother. I guess he got remarried. Anyway, masked dude shoots the shit out of Madeleine's mother with a machine gun. It's quite a dark start to a Bond film. This ensues the moment we knew was coming from the childhood talk that Madeleine had in Spectre.
He didn't know I was upstairs playing in my bedroom. Or that Papa kept a Beretta 9mm under the sink with the bleach.
The child actress playing the young Madeleine is pretty convincing, and I'm honestly immediately aboard here. Of course, it turns out our villain is still alive and Madeleine runs off, ending up under the ice with the masked dude shooting at her. This helps us understand more of the trauma that adult Madeleine is dealing with, who's out in Italy with the retired Bond following the events of Spectre. And you gotta hand it to Craig. He still looks damn good after all these years as Bond. He's probably the only Bond who looked just as fit in his first and final Bond movie. Something that can't really be said about any of the other Bond actors. Bond and Madeleine are driving the DB5 in gorgeous shots in a very dreamy sequence. And we get this lovely little nod.
Can you go faster?
We don't need to go faster. We have all the time in the world.
And meanwhile, the Majesty's music is playing in the background to go along with it all. It's really well done and reminds you the filmmakers care about its own history and the fans. It really hit me in the cinema. I'm watching a new Bond movie here. And the shots of Matera, Italy, as the DB5 drives in, it's all just very beautiful. Because of a local tradition to burn the past, Madeleine and Bond decide to follow suit to truly open up to each other. Bond promises to let go of his past with Vesper if Madeleine lets go of the demons of her past, which we just witnessed earlier on. So Bond visits Vesper's grave, which is conveniently also in Matera. Apparently she's buried with her parents, who I guess are Italian now? In any case, it makes for what I think is one of the most emotional moments in the film.
I miss you.
To me, this tiny little line with the Vesper music playing in the background was more heartfelt and more of an actual moment of solace than the entirety of Quantum of Solace ever was. It's a lovely little moment for us fans, after seeing him throw away that surveillance tape of her in the previous movie, to see that Bond still cares this deeply about her after all this time. It's very heartwarming. It's a moment I wasn't expecting to happen in this movie. Neither was the moment following. I was happy they did not show that moment in any of the trailers because it genuinely came out of left field. So, Spectre is back and Bond soon has to deal with his goons in the action scenes following. I think to me, this is the real shame about social media and all of the trailers nowadays, because I've pretty much seen most of the stuff this action scene had to offer already before seeing the film. That doesn't take away that even though most fans already saw that bridge jump and the bike jump multiple times, it's all still pretty impressive. So Bond quickly ends up in a pretty exhilarating fight scene with Primo. I like the dynamic camera going along with this. Again, the direction feels very fresh and different. Primo makes it seem like Spectre is some mob family with this line.
Blofeld sends his regards.
Most notable though is that Primo claims that Madeline is the daughter of Spectre. You can see a variation of disbelief yet doubt in Bond's face as he finishes him off with the eye falling out. And Bond is just like, huh, oh well, taking your bike. Maybe because of the trailers and promotional material used, I was expecting a pretty major action scene with this bike. But apart from that cool stunt I talked about earlier, Bond really only uses it to get back to the hotel. No real complaint though, just used differently than I thought. As Bond comes back to the hotel, he confronts Madeline about Spectre. She seems genuinely unaware of what is going on. The concept of Madeline returning from Spectre as the first main Bond girl reprising her role in a consecutive movie, it's pretty interesting in itself. I wasn't really that blown away by her in Spectre, and I didn't really see why she happened to be the new woman Bond fell in love with after Vesper. Here, I think Léa Seydoux gets much more to do, and Madeline's background plays a much more central role to the actual story. I do have to admit, and you'll see it throughout this review, I did warm a lot more to her character this time around. So Bond takes Madeline into the DB5 to get out of there. This is the moment which I think is some great foreshadowing of later events.
There's something I need to tell you.
I bet there is.
So the pair gets away, and Madeline gets a phone call from Blofeld, with a neat little octopus caller ID included, as you do. She's obviously framed to make it look like she's working for Spectre, but never for a second did I believe she actually turned out to be on their side. Bond does. I guess for him it's Vesper all over again. So Bond and Madeline end up in the middle of the square, boxed in by all the Spectre goons shooting the crap out of the DB5. Again, Bond looks like he's ready to give up, not because he doesn't have any chances left, but mostly because he doesn't seem to care anymore. It's a pretty tense moment. The goons are shooting heavy machine guns at the bulletproof glass, Madeline is screaming like crazy, and Bond is just numbed out until he gets that tiny sprinkle of hope to save her. So he activates the badass button. Although, again, this was another moment spoiled by all the trailers, it has to be one of the coolest action moments in No Time to Die. And the Gatling guns make for a fresh new gadget for the DB5, as do the explosive spikes he used a bit earlier on. All of this is really badass. So Bond manages to make his escape, and he takes Madeline to the train station, gets her on the train, and they part ways.
How will I know that you're okay?
You won't. You'll never see me again.
It's another heartfelt moment, a very powerful opening, because you would almost forget, yes, this was only the opening, the longest pre-title sequence yet, beating the one from The World Is Not Enough, clocking in at nearly 20 minutes, and I admit I thought Spectre had an amazing action-packed pre-title sequence too, but this, in No Time to Die, is a very all-round perfect one to whet your appetite. A cool flashback opening explaining Madeline's background and foreshadowing our main villain. Bond and Madeline in a romantic setting, beautiful locations, an emotional callback to Vesper, sudden turns of events with Spectre, spectacular action, and an emotional setup with the breakup between Bond and Madeline. This is all top-notch stuff, and I was completely aboard for this. The title sequence starts with a neat little reference to the opening of Dr. No, with all the colored circles. the Billie Eilish title song. I kind of like it. Yeah, no, this song is not bad at all. I wasn't much of a fan of Sam Smith's whining ballad with the writings on the wall, but this one, it really grew on me. The lyrics are very powerful, going along with the movie's story too, and Kleiman's visuals aren't too shabby either. More callbacks to previous Bond movies, the DB5 sinking into the abyss, Walter PPK's posing as DNA strings. It's all great. I really don't have much to critique this movie with so far, because all of this so far made for a solid start to the film. I was so ready to see what was coming up next.
I assume at the end of the pre-title sequence in Italy, Bond and Madeline get separated somehow. Maybe he assumes he gets killed, or they get separated, and then the titles showing him being by himself, or the time flying by, basically. They'll use that montage showcasing like the time is moving along, and then after the titles, it's like 5 years later or something.
He said it! He said it! So anyway, after the titles, we witness the raid of an MI6 laboratory, where we are introduced to scientist Valdo Oberchev, who is a combination between a plot device and a comic relief played by David Danzig.
One day I will put Ebola in your tea.
Soon, however, Valdo gets a phone call from Safin, our main villain, that Spectre is coming. For a moment upon first viewing, this makes you think that Safin is yet another villain part of Spectre. You know, like all other main villains in the Craig era turned out to be. But no, Safin is in fact a separate entity who just happens to have knowledge on Spectre and wants this to happen for his own plans. So the special forces of Spectre come in and they are not messing around, blowing shit up, killing innocent scientists, kidnapping Valdo with a cool throwback to Dr. No with their radiation suits, by the way, and killing more innocent scientists. A typical Tuesday for Spectre. Primo from the pre-title sequence also returns, and so does his eye. So the big reason Spectre are here is because they need to steal a bioweapon by the name of Project Heracles, a dangerous weapon containing nanobots, which can be coded to an individual's DNA. They make an impressive escape through an elevator shaft using a device spreading magnets around that enables them to briefly float before they fall. It's quite futuristic and quite rare to see Spectre goons be this professional. You know, SWAT team-like. So the plot is set in place. Moneypenny has heard about the raid of the laboratory and quickly warns M, who seriously looked like he was just having a sneaky little nap as he walks in, like, hey, shit, yeah, no, explosion, heard it, just a gas leak. Which immediately shows us that M was in fact aware of the bioweapon's existence.
Moneypenny, where's 007?
And this cuts to Bond, who no longer is 007, insinuating us to believe he is talking about him. But as we Bond fans all knew beforehand, that wasn't going to be the case. Anyway, Bond is out in Jamaica, living the quiet life, casually strolling about with some big fish and a harpoon. It's a great little sequence to see Bond at his spiritual home with the whole Fleming connection. He soon finds a cigar, prompting him to know that Felix has been at his place. The cigar is a Delectados, by the way, a neat little reference to Die Another Day.
I'm here to pick up some Delectados.
Delectados? We haven't made Delectados in 30 years.
As Bond makes his way into town, we soon get a glimmer of Lashana Lynch's character coming up. Shortly after, Bond is reunited with Felix Leiter, once again played by Jeffrey Wright, which I absolutely love. I really wish they kept that sort of continuation going with the older Felixes too. It's great to see him reprise his role after so many years. He's also joined by sort of an assistant, Logan Ash, played by Billy Magnuson. And I swear, my girlfriend in cinema immediately was like, that's the bad guy, no question. We soon move to a setting we rarely see Bond in.
Quiet? Yeah.
I was hoping you could pick up a pack.
James Bond in a nightclub. Laughing with his buddy, drinking Heineken beer. Honestly, I always wanted to be like Bond. And here, he doesn't really make it that hard. I mean, he makes it look like he always wanted to be like me instead. So Felix tells Bond about the kidnapping of Valdo from the MI6 lab, and he wants Bond to try and find him. Supposedly, he's in Cuba now, where a Spectre meeting is about to be held. Bond doesn't really want anything to do with it, though.
My boss is in Reykjavik, Iceland. That is where Spectre's located.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement to make. I'm buzzed.
So it's here where Bond runs into Lashana Lynch's character Nomi, who takes him on a scooter, posing as a chick he'd be interested in for a quick one-night stand. But we all knew beforehand, oh did we knew, that things weren't going to go that way with this character.
Well, that's not the first thing I thought you'd take off.
So you probably already gathered, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the character of Nomi. There was a lot of media hype around her being the new 007. I get it, she's supposed to be the new strong female lead, symbolically throwing out the femininity, making way for a level-headed intelligent character, putting Bond in his place with some sly remarks.
By the way, I'm not just any old 00. I'm 007.
A woman?
You probably thought they'd retire it.
It's just a number.
Yeah.
Now, maybe some people totally get a kick out of this stuff. To me, this type of writing makes her come off as deliberately annoying and childish, instead of strong and professional. I could go on a whole rant as to why the 007 number isn't just a number to us Bond fans, but I feel every Bond fan watching this knows exactly why we hold that so close to heart, so my point would just be moot. But even looking at this twist objectively, it feels like, even story-wise, it doesn't really add much interesting elements either. It feels much more like a political statement to give away his 00 number to a strong female lead who, and boy haven't we said this line way before, is Bond's equal, who has the similar masculine traits and strengths that he has. To me, the best strong female leads are the ones using their femininity as an actual strength instead. Take Paula Patton in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, for instance.
And you know, I think that, unfortunately, we've been told that to be feminine is something wrong or something that we shouldn't embrace as women, but I think femininity is a power that women have because men don't have it. And we should embrace it. And we can still be very fierce and strong at the same time. So that was important for me to play a woman like that.
To me, that is a far more engaging way to be progressive about strong female characters and really shine a light on them. And this came out a decade earlier than No Time to Die. So anyway, M has Q look into Valdo's hard drive. The electric Aston Martin Valhalla, by the way, can be seen in the background. You know, it's quite ironic how this car was so heavily promoted as the new Bond car, but spoilers, it isn't even used in the movie. I'm not even the biggest fans of electric cars to begin with, so I'm not necessarily complaining, but isn't it kind of odd how this was featured in so much car shows and promotional material, and in the end it's mainly there just for window dressing in the background? Anyway, Bond has a hunch that M indeed was aware of the bioweapon Heracles and that he kept Valdo on the payroll deliberately. You would almost think that M is in cahoots with the bad guys in this if you're watching it for the first time. Because of this, Bond agrees to work with Felix after all and find Valdo in Cuba. So Felix instructs him to meet up with his contact there. And it's here where we are introduced to Cuban CIA agent Paloma, played by Ana de Armas, and, well, she's the character in the movie where pretty much the entire Bond community goes like this.
I want you to marry me. I want you to be the mother of my children.
And this entire sequence following honestly makes for one of the most fun scenes in the entire movie.
Don't you think we ought to get to know each other just a little bit before we,
No.
All right.
You do it.
Thank you.
There isn't a whole lot of Bond-like glamour in No Time to Die, but here it is fully present as Bond slips back into his signature tuxedo to infiltrate the Spectre meeting alongside the gorgeous-looking Paloma. It's a sequence that sounds really silly when you describe it. You see, it's Blofeld's birthday, and even though he's locked away in prison back in London, he's somehow present through another one of those bionic eyes that is brought in on a pillow. It's actually quite ridiculous when you think about it. So all of Spectre is somehow present in this one building in Cuba. You can even spot some Spectre characters that appeared in the previous movie, in the big Spectre meeting room. It's here where you get to see the Hercules bioweapon in action, as Blofeld wants to kill Bond through the weapon, but Valdo, working for Safin, programmed all of the Spectre members' DNA to be targeted instead, causing all of them to die. You know, it really makes me wonder if at some point in production this whole weapon was actually supposed to be a virus instead of nanobots, as it works in a very similar way, infecting people upon touch, etc. Maybe the filmmakers changed it to nanobots at a later stage when the real world was dealing with, the pandemic. Who knows really? I obviously don't have anything to back this up with, but it's an interesting thought. So as mayhem ensues, Bond spots his target Valdo, who quickly runs off. We get some more badass moments of Bond sipping a martini mid-action and kicking ass together with Paloma. And I'm totally down for this type of stuff. I really wish Felix went along for the trip himself to fight along these two. This is the stuff we came here to see. Bond being an absolute badass, sipping away strong drinks with a hot chick on his side kicking ass. The music ramping up as Bond goes into badass mode.
Salute.
Salut.
I really adore Hans Zimmer's soundtrack for this movie. All of this stuff is just fantastic. Bond using the machine gun as if it's just another everyday chore for him. Paloma kicking ass with her machine guns. It really makes you go, oh, get out of here, Lashana, I'm watching these two. Shoo. Oh, and of course she steals Valdo. Typical. It ends with Paloma driving a car into the scaffolding, which, by the way, is the same black Chevy Bond was seen in Dr. No. Another quiet little nod to fans. So the pair retrieve Valdo, and soon Bond and Paloma part ways for what turned out to be her only screen time. Although we all knew from the trailers that we really were only going to see this character in this scene, as she was only ever seen in that blue dress in all of the promotional material, but it makes her the third promising female character in a row to be one of the most interesting ones, getting very limited screen time. It's a real shame because I feel there was so much more potential for her here. At least it makes you appreciate this sequence though. Bond takes Valdo on the plane and takes him over to Felix and Logan Ash aboard of a boat. Bond goes on a question fire to try and find out what the Hercules bioweapon is. So Valdo explained that he programmed the weapon to target the Spectre members' DNA. But how did Blofeld know that Bond was going to be there? We soon find out that, what do you know, Logan is the snitch working for the bad guys and he shoots Felix straight in the gut. This ensues a fight between Bond and Logan. A pretty brutal one too. It's over pretty quickly through some unlucky events, and Logan gets the upper hand and locks Bond below deck with Felix.
That's a lot of blood.
That line caused me to swallow for a second, because quite frankly, that made me realize this time Felix wasn't going to make it. Never before in the Bond franchise have they killed off Felix. The closest they ever got was in License to Kill when they fed Felix to the shark that took off his leg. Now, things aren't looking too good as Logan and Valdo escape with the bioweapon, setting off a bomb causing the ship to get flooded. Any moment of doubt whether Felix was going to make it was flooded along with it for me here.
It's a good life, isn't it?
And indeed, we do get the moment where he drowns, in very similar fashion to Vesper 2. It's like Bond is thinking, this is her all over again. It's quite emotional. It's quite a ballsy move on the filmmaker's part. One they could only really do because this is Craig's final Bond film. And we know they will have to reboot after this movie anyway. This allows for some freedom in writing. Some for the good and some for the bad. Whatever you think of this moment, I think it was very powerful. So Bond manages to get back to the surface and ends up in one of those typical yellow dinghies. I don't know about you guys, but I was totally expecting a submarine to pop up under him like in the ending of You Only Live Twice. They didn't go for that though. Connery's Bond usually ended up in one of these with a hot chick in one of his arms. And I do have to admit, Craig looked pretty funny in contrast here, you know, without one. The scene following immediately makes him look the business again though, as he gets yet another old Aston out of storage in London. How much Astons does this dude have around though? It's the Aston Martin Vantage from the Living Daylights making a reappearance here, and I really love it. The awesome soundtrack by Hans Zimmer playing over this, Bond back in his suit rocking his sunglasses as he comes back to the MI6 building. This really is a cool transition scene that really makes you go, that's my dude over there, this is my franchise. Shame not everybody is aware of him though.
Name? Bond. James Bond.
And here we are rejoined by Naomi, being her usual annoying self.
007? That must bother you.
I do have to admit though, as much of the one-upping that Naomi gets to do, Bond gets to do right back at her, and sometimes it does make for a pretty fun ping-pong-like dynamic between the two. I'm still not a fan though. The M scene following is also written in a pretty humorous and different way.
Has this desk got bigger? Or have you got smaller?
Usually in the Bond movies, M would be the only authority in Bond's life, the only person that could really put Bond in his place.
This isn't a personal vendetta, 007. It's an assignment like any other. And if you can't treat it as such coldly and objectively, 008 can replace him.
I'll find you a more suitable assignment, that's all.
So under the
That's all.
The thought had occurred to me.
Good. Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. A relic of the Cold War.
Here, the tables, or desks, have turned as Bond isn't an active MI6 agent anymore, and he has all the reason to scold M as he's partly responsible for the Hercules bioweapon's existence, now in hands of the bad guys. So Bond gets thrown out for it, but it's always Moneypenny we can at least count on, taking him over to Q.
So you're not dead?
Hello, Q, I've missed you.
It's another scene filled with lots of humor in the dialogue.
This is the first time He'll be here in 20 minutes.
You know, they come with fur these days.
I also like that they made Q homosexual in this movie too. I think this is the first where they just straight out state it, and I have to say, it suits Ben Whishar's version of Q. Those concerns about things being too woke beforehand certainly did not apply to this particular aspect, at least not to me. It's all great. There's some nice continuity too, where Q doesn't want to risk plugging something Bond retrieved from the field into the system just like that, after previously making that mistake in Skyfall. It's a nice touch. We get a bit of exhibition of stuff we already know. A separate entity managed to wipe out everyone in Spectre, etc. So Bond desperately wants to speak to Blofeld in the Belmarsh prison. It's here that we learn that only one person has had access to Blofeld all along, which turns out to be Madeline, who also returned working as a psychotherapist. This is also when we finally get to meet Safin, you know, without the mask. Rami Malek portrays him in a very creepy, quiet type of way, and at first the creepiness feels a bit deliberate in his delivery, leaving dramatically long pauses between words to ramp up the creep factor, etc.
You know, if you eat them, they can cause your heart to just stop.
But overall though, he does manage to sell it, and especially the moment he shows her the mask is pretty powerful. Both Malek and Lea Seydoux are really good in this. It's funny, on one of my later viewings in cinema with more casual audiences, you could hear some people in the theater go, "Ah, so he's the man with the mask." It always cracks me up. Safin wants Madeline to use a sample of the Heracles bioweapon, spray it on her hand and get in touch with Blofeld. As it's programmed to connect with his DNA, it will kill him upon touch. Meanwhile, Bond and M meet up in London in sort of a transition scene, getting him back into the service. Meanwhile, the Majesty's music is playing in the background, which I took as a way to symbolize Bond's return to Her Majesty's government. Although I like this, most of the central theme in the dialogue just feels like it's being recycled.
But we used to be able to get into a room with the enemy. We could look him in the eye. Now that the enemy is just floating in the ether.
I mean, haven't we heard stuff exactly like that for like 3 times in a row now? The scene afterwards immediately starts off with some great comedy though.
Oh, Bond! My God, I haven't seen you in how is your retirement?
Shut up, Q. I know he's staying with you.
Ben Whishaw once again is just hilarious in this film. It really cracked me up in cinema. Again though, and I know I'm overstating this, Nomi is continued to be written as just plain childish and annoying.
He's been reinstated as a 00.
00 what?
No, it's good work, Naomi.
Thank you, sir. 00 what?
It really just makes you want to go, the world's most dangerous bioweapon is unleashed upon humanity. Just focus, miss.
I achieved that.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So while Bond's request to talk to Blofeld is now granted, Miss High Achiever is assigned to track down Valdo. But first, a brief bathroom break with Madeline, who's getting ready to kill Blofeld. I guess this is that scene in which Lashana originally suggested to Fukunaga to put that tampon in. So because Madeline sprayed on the nanobots, she obviously refuses to touch Bond in a silent protection move.
Oh, that was awkward. Does it have that effect on all women?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Anyway, the moment of Blofeld being brought into the tiny little room is pretty epic. He's being brought in this tiny cell with the music ramping up, Madeline panicking, knowing her task ahead, requesting to be released and stuff, causing Bond to touch her anyway, unknowingly getting the nanobots, enabling him to kill Blofeld. Madeline leaves the room, leaving Bond to face Blofeld alone. Christoph Waltz is his usual cheeky, silent self. Ah, yes, James, my little brother. How's Madeline? Cuckoo. Blofeld teases Bond about Madeline having some big secret, and another underwhelming reveal being that Blofeld framed Madeline and made her look guilty in the opening of the film, so them separating really didn't have to happen. It was all the work of the author of all his pain, again. This causes Bond to completely freak out, and to me, he kinda loses character here. Upon first viewing, I was surprised Bond fell for the framing of Madeline that easily. He never really questioned how guilty she really was to all this and just put her on that train. Upon subsequent viewings though, I did think about this a bit more. He did lose Vesper in a very similar way, being blackmailed into working for what later turned out to be Spectre 2. It does make sense for Bond to not be that trustworthy of women anymore.
I'm not just a pretty face. I stopped trusting pretty faces a long time ago, Felix.
Yeah, I heard. Bad luck.
But still, I feel kind of surprised that Blofeld manages to get under Bond's skin this much and let it get to him, causing him to touch Blofeld. It really just feels like an excuse so that Bond can actually get to touch him, so that we can see the nanobots in action, causing Bond to accidentally kill Blofeld. Much like Felix, Blofeld has never been killed before. Well, you can count that silly opening in For Your Eyes Only, I guess, but that seemed more like comedy, unlike the more serious full-on death scene we get here. But again, like Felix, the filmmakers now were able to pull all stops and just kill away with the characters. The filmmakers kept talking about all those loose ends that they wanted to tie up in No Time to Die. But with this, it sometimes feels like they're just cutting off most of the loose ends instead. In any case, Blofeld is now gone too, and Safin has now successfully disposed of Spectre in a revenge of Mr. White killing his parents. When you think about it, on paper, this does make him a really powerful ultimate villain to Bond. A guy that just single-handedly wiped out the entirety of Spectre. Let's find out later if he actually lives up to that. So, the plot advances in Norway with more gorgeous cinematography, by the way, and Bond knows he can re-find Madeline Swan here, while Nomi is sent out to track down Valdo. I have to admit though, on paper this scene may sound very melodramatic, and maybe it is, but I find it to be quite emotional and powerful.
For what felt like 5 minutes of my life, I wanted everything with you. And it's not because I didn't trust. It's just that feeling. But I'm not going to leave here without you knowing that I have loved you and I will love you. And I do not regret a single moment of my life, except when I put you on that train.
I mean, I'm not crying. You are crying. Craig and Seydoux sell their love a lot more to me than they did in Spectre. It's a lot more fleshed out and it feels natural, and it always touches a nerve when Craig becomes this vulnerable. To me, this was a good scene. And this is also when we get to learn about the big secret Blofeld was teasing Bond about. Madeline has a daughter. And I don't know about you, but the first thing I thought was, wait, so who took care of the child when Madeline was over in London? It's not like she had any next of kin to take care of her. And wait a minute, how did Blofeld know this was her big secret, that she had a child? Huh. And wait a minute, how did MI6 keep her under close surveillance every time she visited Blofeld, yet they never noticed this woman was pregnant? Really? It really makes no sense. I guess that one moment in Spectre had a whole different meaning now, though. That definitely must have been the moment she got conceived. You could say it happened in Italy a couple of years ago, but I think Madeline was already pretty aware that she was pregnant during the Italy scenes. I think that's when she wanted to tell Bond originally that she was pregnant from him. Also, some fans suggested that she looked at her belly when she was in the car with Bond, suggesting she definitely already knew about this. Oh, and even though Madeline pretends Bond isn't the father, we all totally know that he is the father. I do have to admit though, the child actress playing Mathilde, she's named Mathilde by the way, and her stuffed animal is named Dudu. She's very cute and charming, and I really cannot picture any of the other Bonds in this type of setting. Mathilde watching Saturday morning cartoons, Bond making her breakfast, or, well, cutting an apple. It's completely different and unusual, but somehow, in some weird way, it does force a smile on your face. It's kind of charming. So meanwhile, thanks to Bond's help, Nomi has tracked down Logan Ash, which should lead her to Valdo. And there's some cool paintings here of both Judi Dench's M and Robert Brown's M, by the way. Another nice touch. We soon find out though, Logan Ash is directly in the vicinity of Bond, cueing in more action. By the way, No Time to Die has the longest runtime of all the Bond films to date. At this point in the movie, it's pretty much surpassed the entire runtime of Quantum of Solace, while No Time to Die still has a good hour left to go. At least there's still enough going on to keep it interesting and keep things going. No wonder this is my longest recapping episode to date. I mean, Jesus. So Savin's guys show up in Land Rovers, tailing Bond, while Bond shakes some of them off in a cool way. Of course, much more of them show up later with some pretty amazing looking stunt work. Even though most of these shots were already shown in all of the trailers, it's still very thrilling. This will definitely go down as the only Bond movie in history to have Bond in a life-threatening car chase while he has an innocent child in the back seat. The chase does kind of feel like a new Land Rover commercial. Oh wait, it was the new Land Rover commercial. So Bond enters the misty forest and the chase continues there. You gotta give No Time to Die credit for constantly coming up with a lot of stuff we've never seen before in a Bond film, while at the same time still maintaining the feeling of watching one. This is the first time it feels like Bond has his own family now, and through circumstances they really didn't have any hand in, they are forced to survive and protect each other. I'm not necessarily sure that had you told me beforehand that Bond would have a child in this movie, that I would completely like that and all. I mean, I know it happens in the You Only Live Twice Fleming novel, but I admit it does work for the setting of this movie. I think this is an advantage of this being the final chapter of the era, and we know the reset button is going to be pressed after this movie anyway. I love it when Bond is brought down to a situation without too much technology, forcing him to use his own wits. I mean, fair enough, he does use a grenade launcher to blow up another Land Rover, but he also uses its pull cable to set up a trap for the goons on the bike coming. Soon it comes down to Logan Ash versus Bond, who ends up crashing his Land Rover before you know it. This cues what I think is arguably one of the most badass kills Daniel Craig's Bond ever made.
Why don't you help me out, brother? I had a brother. His name was Felix Leiter.
This, of course, is a direct homage to this moment in For Your Eyes Only.
You left this with Ferrara, I believe.
Safin soon shows up though, kidnapping Madeline and Mathilde, escaping the scene. And then Nomi shows up in the new DBS, pretending to be a badass bitch again. So where the hell was she this whole time? So Bond already told her the day before that she needed to find Logan Ash.
We don't have a trail.
Logan Ash, State Department, ex-State Department. Find him, you'll find Obruchev.
And then she stayed around a little bit to watch Bond's interrogation and complain about his way with women some more, but soon she left to find Logan Ash. We knew she was already in the vicinity way before Bond was even aware these guys were here, so what the hell had she been doing this whole time? Some 007. So Bond and Nomi end up working together, making way for the big climax scene coming up. This is the moment, however, where Nomi states this.
Sir, permission for Commander Bond to be redesignated as 007. It's just a number.
And I am completely self-aware that I am the one sounding childish now, but I honestly was so relieved when that happened. I guess to a lot of fans, this number really is that important. It certainly is to me, and it's ironic because from that character development moment onwards, Nomi is being more of the likable character I think she was intended to be in the first place, and finally becomes more enjoyable to watch, at least to me. So Safin is stationed on an island near Japan, and thanks to a hair he found of Madeline earlier on, he has her DNA and can easily program the Heracles weapon to let her, and thus her daughter, be killed. I also never got how Primo is working for Safin too. Wasn't he working for Spectre in the pre-title sequence, having that bionic eye that was linked to Blofeld and such? He was the only Spectre member not to get killed at that Spectre meeting in Cuba, so I guess somewhere in the middle he transferred his loyalty to Safin, kind of like what Jaws did working for different bad guys. Or maybe he had been working for Safin since the very beginning. I just didn't immediately get it, I don't know. So Safin's villain lair, the farm as it's dubbed, is an ancient missile base transformed to a nanobots factory, and I think it's here that the movie becomes a bit confusing. There's this whole element of Safin having a poison's garden, which I know is a reference to the Garden of Death of the You Only Live Twice novel, but apart from some dangerous tea, it really doesn't go anywhere. Safin's motivations become somewhat unclear to me too. I know he wanted revenge on Spectre, because Mr. White killed his parents. He has already wiped them out, so I know he still is a bit sick and twisted towards Madeline ever since he pulled her out of the ice when she was young, so he has her life in her hands. Got it. But what is the purpose of this whole factory towards the world? The world domination bit, it seems to come kind of out of left field. He can wipe out humanity if he wanted to and spread it around like the Omega virus in Majesties. The whole point of where these other motivations came from, It's kinda lost on me. Anyway, Bond and Nomi drop in on the island in this slick drone-like plane that can turn into a submarine. Pretty cool. Meanwhile, Q is tracking them through the field, Benji, Mission Impossible style. All the sets of this layer are clear homages to past Bond movies, looking like the submarine set from The Spy Who Loved Me, and the obvious similarities with Dr. No's villain lair, which I swear for the longest time made us fans believe Safin was a new modern day Dr. No. I still believe they must have at the very least talked about that during production, but it didn't make it in the final movie. I guess that's for the better. While Nomi is down at the factory, Bond soon comes face to face with Safin in this oriental setting, which again really has these Dr. No vibes all over it. The dialogue between Safin and Bond is pretty classic megalomaniac Bond villain versus Bond.
So here I am, their invisible god, sneaking under their skin.
You know that history isn't kind to those who play God.
So even though Safin wants to play God now and such, it's still missing some more reasoning. Anyway, in an attempt to get his daughter to safety, Bond makes a sneaky move to try and kill Safin, but he's a fraction too late and Safin soon escapes. Now, before, Safin was all about having Madeline and letting her daughter be raised in this place, but here he's just like, screw it, little shit just bit me. Let her run around in my sinister villain lair, what do I care? And then there is this other aspect of buyers coming to the island, which really adds to the confusion of the climax. Maybe I still need to watch the movie a few more times, but my point is, it's a bit altogether for the movie's final. I'm not just complaining about the climax though, this is the only time we're seeing Craig's Bond in a proper full-on classic villain lair at the end of the film. And it's really reminiscent of the old days where Bond goes up against a whole squadron of goons trying to save the world, blowing stuff up, just like in those days. It isn't necessarily believable to have Bond be a one-man army surviving grenades like they're nothing and such, but I can easily suspend my disbelief for that kind of stuff. Nomi also gets a little moment where, out of nowhere, ethnicities play a part in the movie now.
To exterminate your entire race from the face of the earth.
Do you know what time it is? Time to die.
And I think this moment was supposed to be the big ass-kicking moment for Nomi, but because they bring in race out of nowhere, it really just feels like another shoehorned in political statement for Black Lives Matter or whatever, and we're supposed to go all, yay, you go girl. To the easily offended, I may not have the desired opinion on this, but it feels very forced again. To be fair, this is more on the writing than on Lashana Lynch. So Bond reunites with Madeline and Mathilde and soon gets them to safety with the help of Nomi, who you would think as the strong 00 agent would be the one to continue on trying to save the world so that Bond can get his own family to safety. But no, she's happy to let him be the man now and get the job done. So Bond and Madeline part ways and he's up to try and save us all again. He also ends up in a fight with Primo. Again, much like that first fight they had in Italy, I like the dynamic camera work they go for, and the classic styled one-liner that Bond delivers as he uses his EMP watch to blow up his bionic eye.
Bond, do you read me?
I just showed someone your watch. Really blew their mind.
So Bond soon finds the control room, complete with the classic 60s styled control panels to try and open the missile shutter so that the British Navy can fire their missiles at the island. Bond only has a few more minutes to get off there now. Meanwhile, Bond also finds Dudu, the stuffed animal of his daughter. It's a cute little moment of something you can't really imagine any of the other Bonds in. But yeah, I guess No Time to Die just makes it work. However, the missile shutters close down again, which is bad news, so Bond needs to do it all over again. But this ensues the final confrontation between Safin and Bond. It's damn brutal. Bond breaking his arm in the water, but soon finding out he's been infected with the Heracles program for Madeline's DNA. So now he can no longer touch her or his daughter. It's actually pretty damn dark, and we know from Q there's no antidote to this. Bond fans have been speculating for years before this movie that they were going to kill Bond off in this. And from this moment on, I was pretty certain like, oh shit, they're gonna do it. Bond kills Safin off as if he's just another everyday goon, and that's the end of him. I think even though Malik's acting was good, the writing of his character had a lot more potential. His build-up in the pre-title sequence was very promising, and I was totally on board for his background and animosity towards Spectre, etc. But in the third act, it really makes him just another villain. It's quite ironic that just another villain manages to succeed with all of this. This, of course, all leads up to the sad finale we started to feel coming from here on in. Bond is infected with the nanobots. He can no longer touch his girl or his child, and the missiles are coming in. He opens up the shutters again and seems to be accepting his defeat. We get some emotional calling between him and Madeline, telling her he won't be able to make it this time. And even though you would think Bond always finds a way within the time that he has left, he simply seems to just give up. I know he's wounded and infected and such, but you would really think he would still find a way. He is James Bond. But no, it's true. Our speculations were correct. James Bond dies at the end of No Time to Die. It's pretty emotional, but honestly, I would think it would impact me a lot more. Upon my first viewing, all I was thinking was, so they did go there after all. It is true. Upon more viewings, knowing what was coming, I can accept it a bit more, and I could even argue as to why this could be a fitting ending to Craig's tenure. I mean, I could come up with some fair arguments here too. And yeah, the moment of Craig staring into the sky with those blue eyes, accepting his demise, it is pretty sad. And so is that moment of Madeline and Q looking in silence with tears in their eyes. But ultimately, this is not the ending I would have wanted. Maybe I would have preferred Bond to secretly survive and be around in the shadows, fulfilling his duty of protecting us all, including Madeline and Mathilde, maybe without them knowing. Kind of like what happens to Ethan with Julia in the Mission Impossible series. But even more so, I walked out of the cinema feeling kind of empty because of this ending. Bond is gone. It took me weeks and maybe even months to form my opinion on this because I was just so divided on the ending. But in the end, I gotta say, Bond is supposed to be the embodiment of survival. This has always been his thing.
Why can't you just be a good boy and die?
You first.
And not just in the Bond movies, but also as to what Bond means to the public in the world.
The idea that one brave person, applied with adequate backup and technology, can stop something big and bad from happening, it's immensely reassuring to people.
Bond is an assassin. He can't have a family. He can't have a wife. He carries a heavy burden, having to go out and fight to protect all of us.
By doing this, you erase that purpose of what Bond represents to all of us, in my opinion. Even if the ending can be pretty moving, and even if you can argue why it works, I think I can safely say not a lot of Bond fans had this on their wish list. So in the end, the MI6 staff toast a drink in honor of Bond, and we never really learn if Nomi now becomes 007 again or gets some other 00 number. I guess that just goes to show it really was just a statement instead of an important story element. I like the quote that M uses in Bond's honor.
Shall not waste my days trying to prolong them. I shall use my time.
Which I think is a direct reference to Ian Fleming. However, it was also a quote from Jack London. In any case, it's a suitable quote. And the movie ends with Madeline and her daughter driving on the same stretch of road as where the movie started.
Mathilde, I'm going to tell you a story about a man. His name was Bond. James Bond.
And the credits come on with Louis Armstrong's All the Time in the World, bringing No Time to Die to a close. Oh, and if you stuck around at the end of the credits, it does in fact say James Bond will return, confirming the reboot. So with that, recapping 007 will also return. So, No Time to Die. Did it live up to the overly long wait? Well, let me just say up front that I think it's a solid Bond movie. It looks amazing, the soundtrack is great, the humor is there, and it has one of the best pre-title sequences in the series. That whole sequence of Safin coming to Madeleine's house, everything they did in Matera, the emotional moment of Bond visiting Vesper's grave, there's just so much to appreciate in this film. The fantastic stunt work, the whole storyline between Bond and Madeleine playing out, and that whole sequence in Cuba was just amazing. I mean, Paloma, I feel, ended up being one of the most fun and likable characters to remember from this movie. She was great. And what about those concerns of things being too woke? I feel No Time to Die manages to be fun for everyone, whether you are very pro or anti-woke orientated. It doesn't fall into a complete miss on that front at all. Yes, even Nomi, despite me having some problems and constantly complaining about her character, ended up being just fine, especially near the third act. Well, apart from maybe some moments. However, I do feel the ending is so dominant into forming your opinion on this movie, it leaves such an impact, overshadowing everything that came before it. You're not going to remember this movie as the only one where Felix dies, or Blofeld gets killed, or Bond is having a daughter, even though all of those elements are really unique for a Bond film. You're going to remember this as the one in which Bond is killed. And whether you are on board with that or not, I think it's one of the most polarizing elements the Bond franchise has ever pulled, which I guess is also something you can credit them for, because boy, does this spark conversation. I bet you guys in the comments are going to be pretty divided on all of this in the movie yourselves, because it truly makes you think, where do I stand? How do I feel about this ending? And your opinion is as good as mine. It is what it is. Overall, I think No Time to Die is a solid Bond movie that I guess I could place maybe somewhere between my top 15 or top 10 Bond films. But I feel I can't truly appreciate and process that ending until we can put it more in perspective when the franchise reboots it with Bond 26. Whenever that happens. Hopefully well within 6 years this time. Or 4. Preferably 2.